Karen Vicari, Public Policy Director, Mental Health America of California.
And one of the things that the main reason that we're here today is to talk about Proposition 1. When I was talking to you ahead of the interview, you said that a lot of people don't understand the complexity of what Proposition 1 is all about. So I'd love to start actually right there. Break it down for us. What's on the table with Proposition 1?
So much is on the table with Proposition 1. If you read it, it's hundreds of pages long. To boil it down, it diverts services funding from the Mental Health Services Act, funding that currently goes towards vital community-based services gets diverted away into what they call housing services. And that's really partly where the complexity lies. The Mental Health Services Act is incredibly complex. So the changes within that are significant. There will be significant changes to county budgets and how counties can spend their money. And the other half of it then is a bond measure that provides about $1 billion in permanent housing for veterans, about $1 billion in permanent housing for the unhoused population or people at risk of being unhoused, and then just over $4 billion to build brick and mortar facilities in accordance with the BCHIP program in California. And so that is technically that's inpatient facilities and a variety of outpatient facilities, including treatment, crisis, respite, wellness centers, a whole variety of outpatient facilities.
And you said brick and mortar. Is that the corporation who owns these? That sounds like a private contract, perhaps.
Yes. It's the bond portion is only for buildings, right? So it doesn't fund any services within those buildings. It's all buildings that will be most likely built by private corporations.
Okay. And so for somebody who knows nothing, they might say, well, this sounds really good. There's a lot of unhoused people. Many of them might have mental health challenges. So what do you think? What do you think about it?
There's estimated to be over 180,000 unhoused people in California. The permanent housing that will be built by this, if we look at what's happened with No Place Like Home, which was authorized by voters in 2018, same amount of money, $1.9 billion was authorized under No Place Like Home, and they've built about 1,700 residences. 1,700. If we compare that to 180,000 unhoused people in California, it's a drop in the bucket. And especially if we consider that it's well known that homelessness in California is largely because of a lack of affordable housing. Over half of California renters are severely rent burdened, which means that any large bill that they have puts them at risk of homelessness. So homelessness is going to continue to rise until we build significant numbers of housing, right? So people that say that this bond measure is going to address homelessness, it's not. And what people really don't understand is the significance of the service cuts. 30% of MHSA county service money will be diverted. So that's money that goes towards really important community-based services, outpatient treatment, wellness centers, peer-run services, which are known to be highly effective and very cost-effective, are going to be first on the chopping block. There are more services that will be cut, but I think that's the piece of this that people really don't understand. Is it worth it to reduce services for people that really need them to end up with 1,700 homes and some outpatient or inpatient facilities.
And so I also looked into SB 43 a little bit and SB 326. SB 43 being about conservatorship, which looks like it will be made easier under this, easier for the state to conserve. SB 326 is this diversion of funding that is now being rolled all into Prop 1. And so it just, and so I guess right now we're speaking clearly just about housing as like this being by cutting this mental health money, it will go towards housing. But talk about the aspect of it that how it all got rolled into mental health, because I know an aspect of this is to create X number of beds in treatment facilities. So the like how is it that they're planning to get the people into the treatment facilities, and how is it that these two issues are being kind of put together in this way or set up against each other?
California is clearly moving towards reinstitutionalization. That was clear by SB 43. And I mean, I think they clearly go hand in hand, right? What the state is trying to do is they want to get rid of encampments. That's their concern. Their concern is not the vast majority of unhoused people who are not in encampments. And the view is that everybody in an encampment has a serious mental health challenge. And that's simply untrue. You can't just go sweep an encampment and put people inside treatment beds, because most of those people are not going to qualify for any of these services.
Or the other thing I'm hearing is that let's say that there is somebody with a dependency order and they're put into a treatment bed, then what happens when their treatment is done?
Exactly. If you're pulling, thousands of people off the street and putting them in a temporary treatment bed without building the necessary housing, there's nowhere to put them when they are ready to leave that bed. They're going to be pushed right back out into the streets. We believe that we're putting the cart before the horse by building treatment beds before we have sufficient affordable housing in California.
Yes, this is so interesting. And I actually covered, I went to a session in the fall called How to Love Somebody Who Loves Drugs. And it blew my mind. I was like, okay, I'm going to go. It was at the psychedelic conference. And they were talking about harm reduction. And one of the counselors, his name was Maurice Bird, he goes and sits in an encampment and will talk with people and figure out how he can kind of meet them where they're at. And they talked about, okay, what would it look like to reduce your risk? Which family members can you reach out to? And it was like, oh, all these things that kind of the opposite of what like the Nancy Reagan era taught us, right? It was saying like people who are using probably do need a community, or people who are struggling with a mental health issue, they do need their families. And so they were just talking about like how efficient would it be to get how like the research around giving somebody treatment against their will was a big concern on their part. Where do you land with this issue?
What you just described is recovery-oriented services. What you just described is peer-led services, which are the most effective. Someone with lived experience can talk to someone in an encampment, just like you explained, and figure out where the strengths in their life are, where the weaknesses are. And with that person, together come up with a plan, a voluntary plan to find true recovery from a mental health condition or a substance use condition. The alternative to that is force, is the police coming and putting handcuffs on someone and locking them up in a bed. And this research shows that that's traumatic. That makes people fear seeking treatment, it does not result in any sort of long-term recovery. And so that's why Proposition 1 is so dangerous, because it's those peer-led, recovery-oriented services that are the most effective, which are the ones that are most likely to be cut under the funding reductions.
Thank you. Yesterday, when I was interviewing somebody who is on the side of yes, who's also a part of NAMI, National Association for Mental Illness, correct? Am I saying that right?
National Alliance
Alliance.
on Mental Illness.
So they're a sponsor of this bill, and Mental Health of America, or Mental Health America of California. I'm going to glean from the way you're answering my questions that you are on the side of no.
Correct. We are a signature on the opposition argument.
And so why do you think NAMI, I'm going to tell you about some of the things I heard from the NAMI representative that I spoke with, but why do you think that they are supporting this? What did they, like, why the disconnect?
It's interesting. So I personally identify as a person with lived experience, but I also have a sister who is unhoused in San Diego with mental health and substance use challenges. The people active in NAMI are most frequently family members, parents often, of a child with a severe mental health challenge. But the parents have not themselves ever been forced into treatment. And they also do not have generally an education into recovery-oriented services and the effectiveness of them. And that's where the disconnect lies, is the parents want to do anything to save their children. And to them, that is locking them up. Where for us, even though my sister is unhoused, I know from experience that locking her up is not going to help. I need to find her someone she can connect with who can guide her into voluntary services. Did I explain that disconnect?
You did. Yeah. And I appreciate you sharing that vulnerable information. I'm sorry that you have a sister out there right now. How often are you able to talk with your sister, and what are your worries for her?
Oh, I have so many worries for her. And I don't talk to her often. She has a phone, she loses a phone. She's, I haven't spoken to her actually in a couple of years when she ended up in a domestic violence shelter. And it was so traumatic for her to be in that environment that she bailed. She bailed on the shelter because of all that she had been through. It's so traumatic to be on the streets. They are subject to violence, and they see violence there. They experience violence. It's so traumatic out there that she couldn't just instantly open up in these groups she was required to go do and start talking about everything. I mean, if I could explain the trauma she felt when she was in this shelter, I would. But I can't. It was that strong, and she just left the shelter. I haven't heard from her since.
So that says something about needing to really meet people where they are.
Yes, yes, and give them time. People need time to decompress. They need a house first, time to decompress, and then be slowly introduced into services rather than having it all forced right on them.
Yes. So I'm going to tell you some things I heard from the Proposition Yes side, and I'm going to let you respond to them. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
So one of the things I heard, because I've been digging into this issue since summertime. It took me, well, and I've done a few stories, SB 326, SB 43, and I looked at somebody who had their parent conserved because they'd gone through their own houselessness and substance challenges in their own recovery journey and had no idea how to support their elderly mother. So had the person conserved. Now the woman is in her 80s. Now daughter is a certified nursing assistant. She can't get her mom out. She feels like her mother is incarcerated, and her mother's diagnosis is bipolar disorder. So like that was eye-opening, because at first when this woman heard about this plan, or she thought, oh, well, that would be good if everybody had a chance to get a taste of sobriety, like maybe this would be a good program. And then she started to dig in and she started to see, oh, wait, this is related to the same kind of, thing that I'm experiencing. So I've heard that story. I've heard from some people who are on the side of yes. I've heard from quite a few peer mental health. Are they called mental health educators, advocates?
Probably peer support workers
Peer
or
support
mental health
workers.
advocates. Yeah.
Yes, I'm hearing a lot of them with lived experiences who have a lot of concern about this. And they're saying, we do need to fix housing, but this isn't the way. And when I told the Yes on Prop 1 person who I interviewed yesterday about that argument, the response was, well, people doing peer health or peer support are privileged and they don't have lived experience and they're disconnected and maybe they think mental illness is glamorous. And they I'll let you start there because I haven't seen a lot of those things with the people I've been interviewing, but I'm wondering if you could maybe demystify that or clarify what the facts are around these things.
Yeah. To qualify as a peer support worker, you need to have recovery. You need to be in recovery from a mental health challenge. We have a peer training program at Mental Health America of California. And I will tell you that most of the people that attend those training academies are not the privileged people. They're people of very low incomes. They're people who have worked very hard to recover from their mental health condition, to a point where they now are able to work. And they do have true lived experience. I've worked for 2 programs that have peer training academies, and you have to apply and you have to demonstrate that you have had a mental health condition or do have a mental health condition and that you have worked through that. So I just think that's very untrue. Peer support workers are real, genuine, hardworking, dedicated people with true knowledge of what it feels like to live through a serious mental health challenge.
And so it's not about glamorizing it from what I've heard. How do you respond to that?
It's absolutely not about glamorizing it. If you talk to these people, they are just so genuine and so compassionate about the work they want to do. They want to help people, and I mean I think it's almost insulting to someone that's lived through a serious mental health challenge to say that there's anything glamorous about it.
Yes. And did you say that you yourself are somebody you are a person who's you have lived experience as well?
Yes,
Do you feel like sharing anything about your own journey?
I'd rather not on radio.
Okay, that's fine. Um, and what else would you like us to know relating to Proposition 1? What should voters know when they go to the poll? Because some people aren't doing a lot of research, they'll go to the poll and they'll see, okay, the Firefighters Association is behind this. So is NAMI. Sounds like it might, sounds housing sounds good. Why is it important for people to dig in and look at the nuance and yeah, what do you want them to know when they're standing at the polls trying to decide how to vote?
I think it's really important for people to try to understand the full measure, both parts of the measure. Governor Newsom's slogan is treatment, not tense. And this measure decreases treatment services and will not decrease tense. I think it's really important that people understand that our politicians have a different interest than the people in this case. The politician's interest is simply to get rid of the visible encampments, but not to truly solve the problem. And I think the other thing that's really important to know is that with the loss of upstream services the damages caused by Proposition 1 are going to increase every year. So the politicians will be out of office by the time the damages from the service cuts become evident in our society. And it's also very important to know that Proposition 1 is a voter initiative. It cannot be changed by the legislature. People say, well, we'll fix it later. We'll fix the service cuts later. No, none of it can be fixed without going back to the voters.
Okay. And the other thing that the person from the Yes campaign said was that if there were to be a separate initiative proposing a tax to help provide housing for homeless people, that person would vote in favor of it. Do you think that might be like, is this a both and scenario? Could we, it sounds like this is a rush. It's feeling a little bit rushed maybe. It sounds like there's a need to have all the mental health support that we have, and maybe more from what I'm hearing. And it also feels like there's a need around housing. So would you vote in favor if there was ever to be just a support housing option on the ballot?
I agree, it was very rushed, and there was not sufficient time for the measure to be really vetted so it would be truly effective. And yes, for two different things we would support a tax increase. Our behavioral health system is severely underfunded. We advocated for an increase of the millionaire's tax, so there would be more Mental Health Services Act money. We would support that. But yes, I think we would probably also support a tax that paid for true affordable housing for Californians who make less than median income. That's where the housing gaps are, especially the lowest incomes, people on SSI. We need housing for all of them.
Thank you. And then just maybe you'll know this from the perspective of Mental Health America of California. I heard I was talking with somebody who does housing case management in Berkeley, and he shared that his colleagues in Berkeley mental health, they're already being told there's a hiring freeze, which people are speculating might be in anticipation of the passage of Proposition 1. Are you hearing of things of this nature where companies might be, or organizations might be kind of furloughing their hires in anticipation that perhaps this will pass?
Well, there's two issues actually. Last year, the MHSA revenues were about $5 billion. This year, they're expected to go down to somewhere between 2.3 and $3 billion. So at least a 30% cut in services, even if Proposition 1 doesn't pass. That's really important. So I can't tell you if those furloughs are because of the general decline in Mental Health Services Act revenues or a fear over Proposition 1.
Can you clarify what is MHSA? What does the S stand for?
Mental Health Services Act.
Okay, got you. Okay, because I'm looking at MHA behind you. All right, perfect.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you think we should talk about? Anything important that I should have asked you but didn't?
Not that I can think of.
I have one last question for you.
Okay.
I've heard a lot of peer support people using the phrase "nothing about us without us," and then I was surprised yesterday by my interview with somebody voting yes on it who was using the same phrase and kind of questioning like who should be using the phrase. But can you talk about what "nothing about us without us" means, and how you feel like Governor Newsom has or has not abided by or kind of honored that code with Proposition 1 and the Senate bills that went into the making of it?
Yeah. Nothing about us without us is it it refers to the peer community, and it's long been not just a slogan, but it's been practiced. It's long been honored that anything that affects people with mental health conditions should have them at the table in the design of programs that are going to affect them. And Proposition 1 was written behind closed doors. It was pushed through the legislature. I do believe that certain groups were involved. The yes on Prop 1 people were involved in the writing of it. But the people who are against Proposition 1 had no impact, no input into the writing of Proposition 1.
Got it. Thank you. We've covered a lot in a little bit of time. I really want to thank you for making time to talk with me today. I appreciate it.
Sure.
All right. Thank you so much.
I hope I was helpful.